All right, folks, welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. And today we are going to rank the mighty Kansas. And to help me do that today, we are bringing in two guests to help us. The usual none other than Mr. Thom Jennings up there, and our newcomer, Mr. Davey Cretin. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So now Davey comes to us via our YouTube channel because he was a frequent commenter. So
yes.
So you're like I don't know, would we call you a frequent commenter or former fan or both?
Either one is fine. I found you guys by doing a search for ranking the albums of Styx, and that's the first video I watched on the channel.
That's the first one we did.
And then I started watching all the ranking videos. And I think I've seen just about all of them by now.
Give us a rundown a little bit about your musical background, because you have an interesting background there in music.
Well, I worked in record stores for over 30 years in Queens and in Long Island. So I was exposed to a lot of types of music. And I also played in a band, a tribute band, for over a decade. I was actually, I don't know if you guys know this, I was the singer in a Ramones tribute band. So I love prog rock, hard rock, and heavy metal, yet I was singing punk because I like punk too, Clash, Sex Pistols, Ramones. So I did that for over a decade also.
That's a long time.
While I was working in the record stores. So, and I've been just a fan of music since I was a little boy. My mother got me into music. My father got me into sports. That's where I got my love of baseball. And just the music took over eventually. So I'm a huge music fan, and I love all types of rock and roll, some R&B, classical, et cetera, even some old school hip hop.
All right, well, that's good on the background there. It's awesome, and good to have you here.
Do you live near Rockaway Beach?
Not too far. That's on the Queens-Brooklyn borderline.
I know, man. I love, Ramones. I actually lost a permanent loss of hearing in my left ear because I stood too close to Johnny Ramone's guitar amp.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty crazy. It's a story for another day. If we ever do a Ramones ranking, I don't know if Joey'd be
Turntable Tuesday. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna get this show on the road here. We're gonna start the format today. We're gonna do albums number 15. We're going to count them down to number 11. Davey's going to go first. Thom, then I'll follow up the rear there. And just tell about each album in your order of ranking, starting with your number 15, 14, and so forth. And then Thom will go, and then I'll go, and then we'll go down to number 10 through 6. And then we're going to individually do the normal once we hit number 5. All right?
Okay.
So go ahead, Davey. Take her away with your number 15 through 11 there.
Okay, I'm starting. Number 15 is Drastic Measures from 1983. It's the last album before they took a break for a few years. It was a big change for the band. No violin on the album, which is a big no for me. It's a big loss. And 2/3 of the album was written by the new lead singer at the time, John Elefante and his brother Dino. So they wrote 6 out of the 9 songs, and Kerry Livgren, the main composer of the band up until that point, only has 3 songs on the record. They're good songs, but a lot of the 80s production tropes come in, and there's just not many great songs, I feel. Fight Fire with Fire is probably my favorite song. And I also feel that this album contains the worst Kansas song, my least favorite personally, in their discography. If anyone likes this song, that's good for you. I'm just not a fan of it. We each have our own preferences. Get Rich, I think, is a very bad song, a very 80s song. I would compare it to Genesis with the song title just flew out of my head. Oh boy. Not Illegal Alien. Whatever. But it's one of those 80s tracks. It's just too
Jesus, He Loves Me, maybe?
No, it's on the earlier album. The one where Phil uses the real British accent from the early 80s. Is it you? Is it me? Bah, 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 bah. That song. The title just went out of my head, but
There's somebody yelling at the screen now. It's not this song.
Are
Yeah.
you thinking Who
Exactly.
Done It?
that's it.
Look
That's
at,
the
Off of
look
song.
at
Abacab?
Joey.
Was it you? Was it me? Blah, blah, blah. Ugh,
Yep. Or was it X
terrible.
or Z?
Yeah, bad
Yeah.
song. Just like I think Get Rich is a bad song.
Wow.
So
Nice.
that's what I'll say about Drastic Measures. Number 14 is the album before it, Vinyl Confessions, which is the last one with Robbie Steinhardt on violin. And it's the first one with their new singer at the time, John Elefante. And he only writes or co-writes a little less than half the album. So it's still mainly Kerry Livgren writing the songs, but it has those 80s keyboard sounds. It's the first album they used the synclavier on, which is that digital sampler. And just the keyboard sounds, to me, they sound very different from the 70s albums. I don't like them as much personally. Play the Game Tonight is definitely a great pop song. I also like Play On a lot. That's a very good song. And Elefante and Livgren, they only ever wrote one song together. And it is called, oh, that's Play On. And that's the good one. And Crossfire has some nice proggy touches, some nice flourishes on it. Coming in at number 13, their first record in about 6 years, Freaks of Nature in 1994. They put out that album, and it had some of the old members, some new members. David Ragsdale makes his first appearance on violin. So the violin was back in Kansas, which I thought was a great thing. And I feel that Freaks of Nature is very front loaded. The first 4 songs are my favorites. I Could Fly, Desperate Times, Hope Once Again, and Black Fathom 4. And then I feel that it's very front loaded. The second half doesn't live up to the first half, except for the last song, Peaceful and Warm. It has a great coda. The instrumental coda to that song is very good. And this album is all Walsh and everyone else writing. There's only one contribution from Kerry Livgren. So at the time, I really liked it. I just feel it hasn't aged as well as some of their other albums. Coming in at number 12, after a few-year break, Steve Morse joins the band for the Power album. And a lot of fans seem to hold this in high regard. It just didn't strike me as well as some of their other albums have. I mean, Morse adds a lot of guitar heft to Silhouettes in Disguise and the title track. The instrumental Musicato is really good. And the single, All I Wanted, is a great pop song, but it's not really indicative of Kansas, but it's a great melodic song, and Walsh sings it very well. And at this point, he still had his great voice from the 70s into the 80s. On the previous album, I mentioned Freaks of Nature. It's a very dry production, and you notice that Walsh by 94 had lost a lot of the oomph in his voice. Coming in at number 11, The Prelude Implicit, their reunion album in 2016. They hadn't made an album in about 15, 16 years, and they came back with a new singer, Ronnie Platt, and also Zach Rizvi. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right. He co-wrote just about every song on the album. He produced it, and he played a lot of the guitars on the record with Rich Williams, of course, who's been a mainstay throughout the whole catalog, the whole career of Kansas. The Prelude Implicit's a very good album. Ronnie Platt's vocals are on point. He sounds reminiscent of Steve Walsh, but who could be Steve Walsh in his prime? No one, really. What a singular voice Walsh had back in the day. The album starts off with some good rock songs, but the 4th song, Rhythm in the Spirit, I think that should have been the first song. I don't like the sequencing on this record because that song just rocks and it just, boom, comes right in. That should have been the first song on the album. Some other highlights, Voyage of 818, and they named it that because it's 8 minutes and 18 seconds in length. Camouflage, and they had a lot of prog flourishes back. And this was like a return to prog for the band. And I just think it's really good. And the album ends very well with the instrumental Section 60. So those are my 15 through 11.
All right, Mr. Jennings.
Sir Jennings. I've been knighted, by the way.
By who?
It's a good question. I didn't have a good quick comeback. We're not far off, actually, surprisingly. I think there's only, well, there's a couple we're going to have some deviation from. I won't go into the great detail that you have because you're clearly a bigger Kansas fan than I am. But I've got, it's the last one, Drastic Measures, much of the same reason. I love the song Fight Fire with Fire. That's a great song. It's one of my favorites by them. In fact, it's the two songs from the Elefante era that managed to make it into set lists post Elefante were Fight Fire with Fire and Play the Game Tonight, which we'll talk about in a bit as well. But yeah, as an album, it just didn't, it just, I don't know, just didn't, sounds dated, like you said, just not a real strong record. Actually, before I say anything else, I mean, honestly, of the 15 records, they didn't really have a true dud, like one it was just a pure stinker.
I agree.
Yeah, this one, it's, although it starts at the bottom, it's not necessarily a reflection on that it was like a really bad album. I mean, it just definitely is not the best in the catalog. Freaks of Nature, that was I think you mentioned that one as well. That came in at 14 for me. That was the quasi reunion album. So that's David Ragsdale's first record.
Yes.
Steve Morse had left. They were kind of trying to recapture some of their former glory. The lineup just didn't quite gel, after not having been together for a while. And then Vinyl Confessions I have after that, which I think you had a similar spot. So I think those three, there was a little bit of deviation, but not much. But man, I love the song Play the Game Tonight. I remember seeing that on MTV, and Elefante's got a great voice, but yeah, he went heavily into like Christian rock. I think he did some work with Petra and some other bands. He wasn't necessarily a great fit for Kansas. In fact, they've had three singers, and I would say, obviously, I agree with you 100% in terms of Steve Walsh. His voice definitely deteriorated over the years, and I think that's probably why he retired, because he just couldn't do it anymore. Ronnie Platt is just a great singer. I think both Platt and Elefante are excellent singers, but I'd give the nod to Platt just a little bit because he sounds a little closer to Walsh. And then after that, I got Monolith. That does have the song People of the Southland, which is one of my favorite Kansas songs. But, as an album, it's still near the bottom of the pile. And I got one more, right?
Yes.
Somewhere to Elsewhere, which was the last record with Mr. Steve Walsh, the final one. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns?
And he went to Elsewhere.
I think he played with them for a long time after he stopped recording, but he just didn't want to record with them anymore. All right, what were you going to ask? What were you going to ask me, Davey?
What don't you like about Somewhere to Elsewhere?
I said it's not a question of what I don't like about it. It's just in terms of, records in the catalog. I just don't think it was one of the stronger ones. I don't think it's a horrible record. I don't think any of the records are horrible. It's just again, I just don't think that as a whole the album really, again, when a lineup's not together and they kind of come back together, one of two things is going to happen. It's either they're going to make the magic happen again, or I feel like that album, they just tried a little bit too hard. Does that make sense?
Okay. You're entitled to your opinion. That's fine. It's a little different from me, but I'll get to that later.
Well,
we have a deviation on Power coming up as well, because I have that much higher, but that's
Okay.
Oh, you're really gonna hate me. Okay, let me get mine in here real quick. All right, Davey, plug your ears a moment. Number 15, Somewhere to Elsewhere.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, this album comes out of the gate really good with Icarus Part 2, but as soon as the rest of it, nothing really caught me. It just sounded like some guys just playing some instruments. Now, not a bad album. It's just that nothing really reached out and grabbed me, and that's the reason why it's the lowest ranking of the Kansas albums. There's a couple others that are going to come up here in a moment they were kind of neck and neck, and unfortunately somebody's got to be last, and that is this one. It's a shame because this was the last album with Walsh. Who would have known about it? Because he retired, like, what was that, 15 years after that was released. So he stayed with them a long time. So 14 years later, he finally retired. Yeah, it kind of caught me off guard, but I got to see Kansas late 2013. And yeah, he just didn't seem, I mean, he could still sing the hits really good, but you could see he was struggling a little bit there for sure. So yeah, I can understand, and the life on the road is no picnic. Probably really enjoying things, taking it easier on him and his body and everything, not being on the road all the time. Because Kansas did a lot of touring, for what it was worth over those years. They were probably
Yeah,
putting on.
they do you remember, either one of you guys remember what was the album that the Kansas lineup did without Walsh? Like, it was everybody but Walsh. There's one during that 14-year period. I'll have to look it up while we're talking, but they
Yeah,
did.
he's
Yeah,
on-
because they were like frustrated at the fact that Walsh had not that didn't want to record. So the other four guys actually did an album under a different name.
Oh yeah, I think it's what, Seven Wonders or something like that. They
Something,
did a record
but
without him.
yeah, they did a record
Seventh
without him. And
Wonder.
then because I remember they were talking about it, I was reading about it, and they were just like, yeah, he just doesn't want to record anymore.
I think the band is Seventh Wonder.
Interesting.
we'll
I'll have
look
to
it up.
look up on that one. Yeah. All right. So that's my number 15. We got a little deviated here. So that means I'm going to rip right down to 14, which is none other than the most recent Kansas album, The Absence of Presence. Not a fan of this album too much either. It definitely brings them back to the prog sounding, like you were saying there, Davey. I like Never, and for me, that this album, another one very similar to Somewhere to Elsewhere, in the fact that nothing just didn't really reach out and grab me at all. So that, not a bad album, like Thom says. I don't think they've released a total dud either in this catalog. There's not too many bands out there you can say that about. So Kansas did a really good job on at least making consistent albums. Obviously some are just ranked higher because they're better. That's all. Number 13, second album from Kansas, Song for America. Number 13, one of the older ones. The Song for America, that's the best song on the album by a mile. And a couple of the other ones, I would give an honorable mention to Lonely Street and Down the Road, but um, you know, it's weird because that's the lowest number of songs on a Kansas album appears on that one. They only had 6 tracks on them, so they were longer songs. So I think that was. I'm not a guy that really likes really long songs unless they're really, really, really good. You know what I mean? So it kind of hurts the overall ranking when you only got 6 songs and you only like a few of them. And that's probably why this one kind of falls in that area. It probably would have ranked a little higher up had there been a few more songs on it to help booster the overall album for me. But that's just the way I go about ranking them. So let's go on to number 12, The Prelude Implicit, whatever it is. The first
Implicit.
album with Ronnie Platt.
Man, you're just beating up on
Yeah.
poor Ronnie Platt. What's going on? The two of us, we just smacked Elefante around, and then you just gotta go take it right to poor Ronnie
I'm
Platt.
making it up.
He's one of my Facebook friends, man. Don't be mean. And he's always commented on my stuff too. He seems like a really nice guy.
All right, so the 2 songs on this album that I really enjoyed were Rhythm in the Spirit, and I think that was the one Davey said should have been the leadoff track, if I'm not mistaken. And so you can see that I liked it. So, and then Summer was another good one. I feel I really like that song on this album. First album with Platt, I would say it's a decent album. For him, for coming in off the streets here. Could have been better, yeah, but it was an honorable, good effort, and it's nothing wrong with his vocals. I just think the songs themselves just don't really, just not my cup of tea, just except for those 2 that I mentioned. That's my take on that one. And so now I'm going to give you my number 11, which came out in 1979, Monolith. Album kicks off in great style with On the Other Side. I really like that song. And then from there, I really don't have another track that I can honestly say. I think all the other tracks on the album are all kind of just like all in a row. They're all decent, but nothing great. And obviously, people of the South win. A lot of people like that song, "Angels Have Fallen." But for me, it just after that first song, the album kind of just doesn't really climb back up. A lot of times you'll kick off the album and find style, but then nothing else the rest of the way helps lift the album up, and that's kind of what happened here in my take on it. So, but hey, it's number 11. It's better than being number 15, I guess. So,
Oh,
go ahead, Davey. Let's go with your number 10 through 6 there.
okay.
Quick interruption though. It's the name of the band was Native Window.
Native Window.
Native Window. That's the project of was all the Kansas members aside from Walsh.
Yes.
So
I think of another Billy Greer side project, their bassist since the 80s. I think he was on a record called Seventh Wonder, or a band Seventh Wonder, but you're right, I'm wrong. Points off for me. At any rate, coming in at number 10, The Absence of Presence, their most recent album from 2020. They got Tom Brislin in on keyboards, and he's well known in the prog community. He played with Yes, he played with Camel, he played with Renaissance. So he's a known figure in the prog world. And I think he adds a bit of oomph in the keyboard department. He co-wrote a lot of songs, musically and lyrically, and he even sings the last song, which is called, I didn't write it down. Great. At any rate, my favorites on this album are the first two songs, the title track, The Absence of Presence, and Throwing Mountains, I think are great songs. The album peters out a little towards the end, but I think it's still a good effort, and it gets them back into the prog sphere, so to speak. Coming in at number 9 from 1980, Audio Visions, their actual last album to certify. It was a gold album in 1980, and they moved into the 80s like a lot of the other prog bands did. It's the same lineup. It's the classic lineup from the 70s, but a lot of the songs are shorter and they're more radio friendly, let's say. There are only 2 songs that are over 6 minutes, and all the other 8 songs are under 5 minutes in length. My favorites from this album, Hold On, which was a big single for the band. I think that's a great melodic rock song. The radio hit from back in the day, but it probably has been played on radio for over 40 years. Got to Rock On is a great song. And the epic near 7-minute No One Together, which was held over from the previous album. And the last song on this album is called Back Door. And I'm wondering if Walsh wrote it. I was wondering if that's his way of saying he's leaving the band through the back door, because this is his last album with the band. So that's my number 9. Coming in at number 8, I have a love of this album that I don't think a lot of Kansas fans have, In the Spirit of Things from 1988. The second album with Morse on guitar, and it's a semi-concept album. And I know there's a lot of 80s production tropes that are there, the drum sound, the keyboard sound, but Walsh is still on organ. So it still has that connective tissue to the 70s Kansas that I love. A lot of the songs have the old organ sound with Walsh playing it. And I really love 2 of my, I'd say, top 15 Kansas songs, Rainmaker and The Bells of St. James, towards the end of this album. I think are album highlights on this album and almost career highlights because I love those songs so much. And I also have a fondness for the 3 pop rock songs in the middle, the 3 ballad type songs, Once in a Lifetime, Stand Beside Me, and I Counted on Love. I like those songs, although they're sort of wimpy rock songs, let's say. Coming in at number 7, right in the middle of the pack, Monolith from 1979 that Joey already talked about. And he's right. On the Other Side, easily the best song on the album. I love that song. It's a top 10 Kansas song for me. And like Thom mentioned, People of the South Wind's a great catchy song. And it has a little bit of a disco beat, but every rock band was doing sort of disco dancey. Floyd with Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, Styx with Why Me, has that disco beat. So they got in on it. Kansas got in on it. There was some band friction with Walsh and Livgren about the writing credits. They each wanted the same amount of songs. So No One Together was written for this album, but because Walsh said, no, then you'll have more songs than I do, that was held off till the next album. And coming in at number 6, I have Mask from 1975, a gold record, their third album. And it contains what is my favorite Kansas song, The Pinnacle. I think it is an amazing song. And any Kansas fans who haven't seen them perform it on YouTube from Don Kirshner's way back in the day in 1975, definitely look up that performance. It's phenomenal. The Pinnacle is a great song. And of course, Icarus, Born on Wings of Steel, another amazing song to begin the album. And then I like the bluesy sort of boogie rock of 2 Cents Worth. I think that's got a great shuffle type beat. Excellent song. That's my number 6, Mask.
Man, he's very efficient. He's much more efficient than I am, Joey.
Too many notes.
Well, you sure
Sorry.
cram everything in there good though. That's
Yeah,
good.
no. Like I feel like Davey is the if we had a love child, Joey. He has the he has the details and he's quick, Yeah,
Thanks.
very good. All right, let's go with for me, I don't think we deviated too much again in our next 5. What I lose count, was it 11? No, 10.
Yeah, we're on 10 now.
We're on 10. So my 10's Prelude Implicit. That's the first one with Ronnie Platt on lead vocals. Good effort, but again, I think another record where it's kind of like, you mentioned Tom Brislin because he was with Yes, and I was thinking, Yes, they put out a couple recent albums, and the second one was much stronger than the first one, and I think it's just from once a lineup has recorded a record together at least once, they tend to improve after that. They learn some things from that, especially from the feedback and everything. Mm-hmm. So the next one with Platt, I'm going to put a little bit higher. The one after that I think we're about the same spot as Audio Vision's song Hold On. I think Joey and I, we were doing some other show. We were discussing that song title because it's a common one. You have Hold On by Triumph, Hold On by Kansas, Hold On by Wilson Phillips. So fairly, but they're all very different songs. But I just remember thinking that, when I was always compared the two songs very different, but it's just this is a great song for a lot of different reasons. Definitely a live concert highlight, Next one I had In the Spirit of Things, like you mentioned, this quasi conceptual thing about a flood or something that Rich Williams read about. Second album with Steve Morse. Man, I just love almost anything with Steve Morse. He's such a great guitarist. If you ever get a chance to hear any of the live recordings during the Morse era, when he plays some of the earlier material without the violin, you think it doesn't work without the violin, but man, Steve Morse can fill in some gaps, and he did a great job. And then after that, I got Kansas, which, John Brown on the cover. We should talk about John Brown, a great American hero. Poor guy, lived a tragic life and horrible death. But man, did he inspire a great album cover. And Alexis is on that one. Classic Kansas song. I mean, as far as debut albums go, man, you can't really complain about this one. In fact, I mean, they're early. I mean, they really came out of the gate pretty strong. I have to say, that classic lineup, that first one. And then I got one more, right? Song for America.
Yeah,
no, that was
6.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, I think I did 5, didn't I? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, Song for America. Did I say Song for America yet?
No.
Now I did. Song for America. Second album. Again, that great lineup, that original lineup. I feel like they're really starting to get their footing on this particular record. You're starting to kind of foreshadow what's coming in the future, which is really the height of their catalog. I mean, we haven't mentioned the big ones, but I think we're all going to have probably the two big ones after this record in our top 5. Hopefully, maybe not. We never know. So that's what I got.
That's what you got. All right. So, yeah, it's just everybody's starting to deviate a little bit from each other. So I'm going to go even further here. Number 10 for me is none other than the 1995 release, Freaks of Nature, which came for me number 10. Freaks of Nature was the, well, it turns out to be the second last album that Walsh ever made with the band. Interestingly enough, I was gonna say that's like the first album that never charted for Kansas. So it kind of started a downward spiral in a way, because ever since then, the only other album that charted was the Prelude Implicit, which reached number 41. Oddly enough, nothing else has charted since then. So Freaks of Nature, I would say the highlight for me on here would be Hope Once Again. And then the last two songs on here, Cold Gray Morning and Peaceful and Warm. Those songs definitely a great way to end the album. It's just a shame that for me, there wasn't nothing too much earlier on in the album that I really liked. Because if I did, it probably would have been ranked probably a little bit higher than where it ended up. But overall a solid album. That was their first album since 1988. When Morse, with this is the first album without Morse, so they went quite a few years there without releasing any other albums there. So that was my number 10. And so we're going to go down to number 9 here. And that is going to be the 1975 Mask. Yeah, I mean, this album definitely is. This is where on my scale where the Kansas albums start to get good. And this one, obviously, I really like Child of Innocence, It's You, and The Pinnacle. Those are the three standout tracks for me on this album. This came out in the going back here. This was their third album. And yeah, it's like Song of America reached number 57, then Mask kind of went backwards a little. It did make number 70, but this album still went gold. So the that was the precursor to where they really started taking off with their career. So this is like kind of like the album before the big one. The next couple ended up turning to be the real big ones for sure. So this was the album they kind of used as a stepping stone to get to the next level. And so the number 8 album for me will be none other than the debut. And yeah, I mean the debut, you obviously got Lonely Wind. That's definitely to me probably the highlight. Alexis, another standout track. I don't know. I mean, these early albums, I'll admit, I wasn't too familiar with any of as much of them compared to other than the hits on the album that got some airplay. I wasn't really too familiar with them, and so when I went back and listened to them, I was really, really trying to, see where the band was coming from, because obviously this was the debut, and you could start to see things, where they were going, the direction they wanted to kind of go in a little bit on the first album, and it's like each album progressed as time went on. So this was the first album, so it was a solid debut. You gotta give them credit for the first album going gold. That's not always an easy feat, even back in '74 when this one first came out, and it only peaked as high as number 174. So this could be one of those cases though that maybe I don't know for sure, but it could be maybe it got pushed into gold status after the two big ones that came along. You know how that happens a lot for bands. You come out with your first couple albums, you might make a little bit of a chart success here and there on the lower ends of the charts, all of a sudden you get these two monster albums out there, and then everybody trying to wait for that next one. Let's go back and look at some of their older songs in the catalog. And then it helps pushes
the
the
nice
back.
price, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yes,
they were. Yeah, definitely. So I think that could be some of it, but hey, kudos to them because they started their career off with 7 certified albums in a row. I mean, not too many bands can actually say that. Especially bands that have been around as long as these guys have been. It's just weird how nothing after Audio Vision's certified. I was kind of surprised by that, but it happens. Happens to the best of us here. Best bands. All right, so that's enough on the first album. We're gonna go to number 7, which is In the Spirit of Things. I think you guys both mentioned that one already. The second album with Steve Morse. And yeah, this one here kicks off in pretty good style. Ghosts, One Big Sky. And I think like Davey was the one that mentioned about the 3 in a row that just yeah, I was going, man, this is really, really good. You got Once in a Lifetime, Stand Beside Me, I Counted on Love. It was just good to see how these songs were flowing one into another. And I'm going, yeah, I didn't even, I wasn't too familiar with this album. I don't know why, because I love Power and I love Morse in that era. And for some reason, I just never got this album. I guess that's about the time when the hair music really took off in my world. And I was all enthralled in Whitesnake and Great White and Aerosmith, bands that Thom Jennings despises to this day, stuff like that.
I like Aerosmith. But all 3 of those I have bad girlfriend tales associated with them. I never told you, but I got booted from an Aerosmith concert. Well, I didn't get booted, but I had to leave because the girl that I went with got into a fist fight with a girl that was there with her ex-boyfriend. So yeah.
The Tales of Thom Jennings. I can't wait for the memoir.
Yeah, and then I had my Aerosmith tickets stolen. Remember I told you by a girl as well.
That's why I mentioned these bands.
I still like Aerosmith's music, but Great White and well, actually, yeah, because it was Great White and Whitesnake. That girl that liked them, she's the one that stole the Aerosmith tickets. So you have a good memory, Joey. You just like to bring up things that traumatize me.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
what it is.
Oh,
jeez.
I'm gonna put him in a bad dither the rest of the night now. Before I didn't mean to do that.
It's okay.
All right.
It's okay.
So let me finish off here with my last choice of number 6, which is none other than Audio Visions, which turns out to be the last album with Steve Walsh before he would come back quite a few years later down the road there. Yeah, I mean, this album, I think Davey, you were the one that mentioned about how it didn't really have like the old school flavor of, it seemed like it was more pop orientated.
In line
for
with
the
the
most
80s
part.
sound.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first 3 songs really kick off the album fine in that fashion, if that's what you like. And then that's kind of like why I liked it, because they have Relentless, Anything for You, Hold On. I mean, come on. I mean, that's a great way to kick off the album. And then we still didn't even get to No One Together yet. And then, like you said, Backdoor, a great song. I don't know if your take on that is correct, but it very well could be. Walsh, he's kind of like the kind of guy that's, not afraid to say what he feels. He wears his heart on his sleeve, that guy. And that's why I really, really respect Steve Walsh. Got to see him plenty of times down the years here. And, I was just glad I was able to see him live a bunch of times. He definitely is one of the great vocalists, very underrated, I feel. He doesn't really get a lot of recognition like a lot of these other vocalists do. And on this album, this is one of his finest vocal performances overall on this album, I feel. Even though the album, I think you said it was his last, the last gold album, right?
Yes.
So still, that's probably what helped push that album, was the fact that, he had a great vocal performance. Hold On definitely was the main track that really helped get this album to even get where it got. And then, he saw the writing on the wall there. So, and obviously by the time 82 came, he was already out the door and Elefante came aboard there. So, So there we have it. So that's my number 11, number 10 through 6, and now we're going to go back and forth, starting off with number 5 for Davey.
Okay, my number 5 is the self-titled debut from 1974, Kansas. And these guys just came out, boom, fully formed. 6-piece with violin, and not many rock bands had violin at the time. And Robbie Steinhardt, just an amazing player, and he had so much depth to the sound of the band. And somehow they had even a 7th member, you could say, Jeff Glicksman, who produced all their early records through about 1980 or so, and then came back sporadically later on to help the band. He just made them sound majestic, where everyone got to shine. And what I noticed on a lot of the early records, playing them again in order over the past month or so since we discussed doing the catalog, the album ranking here, Dave Hope's bass playing, very underrated, especially on the 70s records. And one of my favorite drummers who's never in a conversation, Phil Ehart, throughout the catalog, he adds so much to every song, almost every song. He's a great drummer. He's very underrated, I think. He's not in the conversation at all. As for songs from the debut, definitely Journey for Mariabron. To me, it's one of their best songs. And the outro, the whole way that song just lifts and goes through the stratosphere with Walsh harmonizing just the oh-ohs, and just Livgren on the synthesizer and Ehart with the emphasis on the cymbals and the drums. It just takes that song and just lifts it right into the air. Amazing song, Journey from Mariabron. Also, Death of Mother Nature Suite, another epic song. And as far as beautiful ballads go, Lonely Wind, great song with an amazing vocal performance from Steve Walsh. And the last thing I just want to say about this album, Livgren's compositional skills, the way he writes most of the songs, the bulk of the songs, and just brings in all the European prog influences and then mixes it with the violin and the American sound, is amazing. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done.
No need to apologize. Yeah, it's interesting, Kansas being in that prog category, because you think prog, it's English, but
for the most part.
Yeah. But I mean, Yes now actually has more members from the US than they do from England. It's kind of crazy.
It's odd.
It is. So maybe Kansas can just start recruiting English guys. It's payback. My number 5 is the newest record, The Absence of Presence. And Joey and I were talking earlier today. We have another kind of show concept we're working on where we share records and stuff like that. It takes a lot these days for me to find records that I really enjoy, especially some of these older acts that just haven't recorded for a while. And man, I popped this one on and I was just really happy with it. I think they did a great job on the production. It definitely was a step above of the previous record that they did with Ronnie Platt. And I agree with you. I think you mentioned before that a lot of it has to do with Thom Brislin. He's got his hands all over this record.
Exactly.
So, is it, but he did some great stuff with Yes. I mean, I don't think he was ever an official member, but he's really one of those kind of unsung heroes in progressive rock, but he's a guy who knows what he's doing, So they were lucky to have him on this record and really just add some great stuff. And yeah, I mean, the big songs on it, what was it? They had, Throwing Mountains is a great one. And Memories Down the Line. Yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, good production, great sounding. Did it have any classics like Carry On My Wayward Son? No, but it still, to me, is an album that a band that's been together for 40 some odd years can put out and be pretty proud of. And honestly, guys, there a lot of these records that have come out post COVID, they've been pretty good. It seems like there's a lot of bands that, because they were just so dependent on touring, didn't spend any time working on new material. So it's nice to have some of these classic rock bands putting out decent albums at later stages of their career.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. All right, so now I am going to go with my number 5, and that is none other than the 1982 release Final Confessions,
Ooh,
which
what?
peaked at
Hold
number
on hold on a sec.
16.
Hello, hello.
Yes,
There's something wrong with the sound, Joey. I think you just said vinyl confessions.
exactly what I said. Final Confessions, and yeah, I mean, so the first album with Mr. Elefante at the helm here. It's interesting because I remember when I first heard Play the Game Tonight. Back then I was just a naive kid who didn't really know. I mean, I knew songs on the radio. I just didn't know a lot about certain bands at that point in time because that was in my formative years. And I would have guessed that was Walsh singing that song and Play the Game Tonight. I never knew because it was on the Greatest Hits album that I got a couple of years later. And I just never realized it was a whole different singer. The band sounded the same. But I was shocked when I found out that it was a different singer in itself because I just didn't follow Kansas at that point, other than just knowing their songs. A lot of our radio DJs never got into the whole aspect of talking much about the bands, and the magazines I would get at that time were more like Hit Parade or stuff like that. They didn't really feature Kansas much in there, so I didn't really know much about Kansas at that point in time.
Yeah,
So
it's interesting you say that. I never thought about this, but Kansas must have been one of the first bands that really had a copycat lead singer. I mean, I think Chicago did, but I don't remember when Peter Cetera left. But like Van Halen, they shifted to Hagar, very distinct. Rainbow, definitely not the same sounding type singer. And Foreigner, even before they went with Kelly Hansen, they had a guy that didn't quite sound like Lou Gramm. So it's interesting to think that maybe in some ways this was a trailblazing album, one of the first bands to try to pull off keeping their sound with a singer that sounded very similar to Walsh. And I agree, he sounds very similar, very similar.
and then like the first time I saw Kansas, they opened for Styx on the Return to Paradise tour at our local ballpark, and they actually Play the Game Tonight. So there's Walsh
Yeah.
singing it because he's back in the band at that point. I'm going. This was like 1997, I believe, 96 or 97. And so I never even that at that point, I don't think I really knew that Walsh never sang on the studio version. Because Kansas was one of these bands that I kind of grew more fond of later on in my career. Because that's just the way, in the middle, the grunge era really ruined a lot of things. Thank God. It's kind of a good thing that came when it did. Could you imagine if the grunge era didn't happen? I'd be in the poorhouse buying too many of these other bands that would have still been making other albums out there that I liked.
Yep.
So it saved me a lot of money. Thank you, grunge era. I appreciate it. So yeah, getting back real quick, Play the Game Tonight, obviously the real true highlight on the album, but Chasing Shadows is not too far behind it. An excellent song that I just feel that that's one of those underrated songs that you just never get a chance to hear much of. I don't know if they ever played it on radio. I don't think they ever never did it up here by us. I don't know about you down
Not
there
down
and
here.
no.
No, not down here.
But a great song nevertheless. And that's definitely the two songs that really, really, and the rest of them are just solid. So I really have no issue with this album, and that's why it's coming in for number 5 for me. So now we can take it down to our top 4. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here.
Number 4 for me, Song for America, their second album from 1975, a gold album. And I just think it's a great album from start to finish. And another vocalist that no one really talks about, Robbie Steinhardt, has a great voice. And I like bands that have multiple vocalists like Styx, Fleetwood Mac, and Kansas. They have two distinct vocalists. And Robbie Steinhardt, great singer, decent songwriter, and an amazing violin player. So Down the Road starts the album off just with his undervalued vocal skills. The title track, one of the best Kansas songs, all 10 minutes of it, amazing track. Lamplight Symphony is an epic song. Lonely Street, very underrated song, and it rocks. And it has that great Steve Walsh vocal. His vocals are stellar on Lonely Street. And the album ends with the epic In Commudro, Hymn to the Atman. Say that 3 times fast. I could barely get it out once. Epic way to end the album. So number 4 for me, Song for America.
All right,
All
Mr.
right.
Jennings.
I love it. Sir Jennings. No, it's okay. It's really Mr. Mine is Power. I think you guys have had this one significantly lower, but I think, Davey, you mentioned that this is, in some circles, this is a very well regarded record. Man, I don't know. I scored a vinyl copy of this recently at an estate sale. I haven't listened to it in a long time, and I just love it. It just packs a lot of punch. A bit of a sentimental favorite. Steve Morse played at a club that I worked at not long after he left Kansas, and we talked about it. And actually, his experience with Kansas almost made him leave the music industry.
Wow.
Not because they were bad guys. It was just the frustration with the fact that these albums came out in an era where classic rock sales were kind of waning, and the two Morse albums just didn't find as big of an audience as the previous ones were. And you know how it is, like record companies back then, you can call it grunge, you can call it whatever. It's like you're only as good as you sold me on the last album, and you're always measured by your previous sales. So, I mean, you look at a band like I don't know, trying to think of somebody like, well, Peter Frampton, for example. He comes out with Comes Alive. This thing sells tens of millions of copies, and then I'm in You still goes platinum, but it doesn't go platinum enough. So that's sort of what Kansas, I think, suffered at that point. But whatever the case, I just think Morse really brought a lot to the band. It kind of re-energized them. It was one of the, I know I've said before, sometimes a newer lineup takes a little bit a time to gel, but I feel like of the 2 Morse albums, this was by far the stronger one, because I think the second one was more driven by Rich Williams anyway. So that's what I got.
If I could just interject one thing about the record company that I meant to say earlier that you
sure.
reminded me of. For these 2 albums in the 80s, Power and In the Spirit of Things, they're on MCA Records, which was never really a great label for rock bands. Some people have joked for decades now, MCA stands for Musical Cemetery of America. They just they didn't give a great push to a lot of bands.
I'm just reading Rick Emmett's autobiography, and he talks about the deal that Triumph made with MCA. MCA, from what I understand, is like that really good looking girl at the bar, and then you get her home and she lets you down. So because they used to sign these extraordinary contracts, but they give these huge advances. But yeah, as you said, they just didn't have the ability to really promote, or they just didn't put any muscle behind. And they were also, from what I understand, very intrusive in terms of the material. Like they would reject a lot of stuff.
Especially probably on In the Spirit of Things, they wanted hit singles. They said,
Sure.
You guys have to give us a hit single. If you don't have a big hit and sell X amount of records, we're dropping you. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kinks, another example on MCA there that didn't really
I didn't know
anything.
they were on MCA. Yeah.
Not long.
So wasn't Leonard Skinner on MCA? But that must have been early. Right?
That was the 70s. Yeah, the 70s,
yeah.
they did their homework, and like Joe Walsh started off on MCA, so ABC Dunhill, then MCA. A lot of these people, they just, that's an interesting MCA, what it stands for there. Music.
Yeah, I like that, Davey. That's good.
I didn't make it up. I've heard that before.
You said Musical Cemetery of America?
Yes.
Drastic Measures, the second Elefante album. I was kind of surprised. I actually like this one better than Vinyl Confessions. I don't know why, but I guess Fight Fire with Fire is a good answer, and followed by Everybody's My Friend. A lot of cool stuff on here. Don't Take Your Love Away. I think this was a very good follow up to Vinyl Confessions, and that's one of the most rocking songs Kansas made pretty much since 1980 there with Fight Fire with Fire. I mean, I don't think they've made one that fast-paced rocking ever since either, really. Even when Walsh came back, they were more, little more power. Power was a big kind of a, but vocals wise, Fight Fire with Fire really that's a great way to start a concert off, I feel it would be for sure.
Yeah, I had that on 45, amazingly enough. I really loved that song.
They always played it too. I think they ended with it the last time I got to see him ever with Walsh. I have yet to see him with Mr. Ronnie Platt, but hopefully that will change.
Yeah.
They're coming to Rochester in May or something, so hopefully I'll get a chance to see that one. I definitely want to catch these guys again for sure, especially to get to see Ronnie in action here. So, yep, number 4, Drastic Measures. We're going top 3 now.
My number 3, very contrarian choice here, Somewhere to Elsewhere.
Oh,
I
boy.
love this record. It came out in 2000. The old band was back, sort of. Billy Greer plays bass he was in the band from Power on till today. He plays bass on every song except a couple, which Dave Hope was brought back to play bass on. And Kerry Livgren wrote every song on this record. And I just think his songwriting is Kansas. That's the Kansas sound, is Kerry Livgren. He made the band, him, and of course in the 70s and 80s, Steve Walsh's voice. And I just love this record. At the time, I co-owned a CD store on Long Island, and we used to play this CD all the time. We sort of specialized in progressive music, so I played this CD a lot over the years, and I fell in love with this album. And I think there's some great songs on here, and I think Livgren's production does Walsh a favor in the vocal department. Walsh wasn't even there when they recorded the album. The whole band was in Kansas recording the album with Livgren, except Walsh was in California working on a solo album at the time, Colossalalia. Say that 3 times fast, another impossible word to pronounce. At any rate, Icarus 2, the sequel to Icarus Born on Wings of Steel, great song. Myriad, one of their epics, 9-minute song. Look at the Time with Billy Greer on lead vocals and Dave Hope on bass. It's a very Beatlesque song. I love the call and response vocals there. And one of my favorite Kansas songs that no one ever speaks about, Distant Vision. To me, this is the second time in the Kansas catalog where the middle section of that song from like 5 to 8 minutes and Steinhardt's vocals just through the roof. Amazing. I love that part. It just hits me every time I hear it. I love it. And once again, it's down to Livgren's compositional skills and Walsh's vocals, Steinhardt's vocals, and just the way the band play, sound, and just interact together. Amazing. I love Somewhere to Elsewhere. Any Kansas fan that's not familiar with it, I highly recommend it. Number 3, Somewhere to Elsewhere from 2000.
Geez, no wonder you hated my lower ranking.
Mine was bad too. I think I had it dead last.
I love that record. I make no excuses.
Yeah,
Love
well,
it.
I mean, that's what's great about these ranking shows is because ultimately there's no right answer. I mean, we said there's a couple of albums which you'd be hard pressed to not put number 1. Like when I think of Moving Pictures with Rush, I mean, it has to be at least top 3, if not
It's
the
in
best,
my top 3.
Yeah, so things like that. But some of these other ones, like obviously we had the Elefante stuff a lot lower than Joey, so.
I knew he'd have those 80s records high. I just knew that.
He loves that stuff.
I was expecting that.
Me?
Oh,
Yes.
Goodness. Yeah. But again, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I give you shit every now and then, Joey, but I love you.
So what do you got for your number 3, Tom? Are you going to surprise us here?
You're like, no, I don't think there's any surprises left because I mean, if you've been following along, I've knocked off pretty much everything. My number 3 is Mask. I will say I really hate this album cover. I don't know why. Maybe because it's just too dark.
Yeah.
It's just an ugly album cover. But yeah, I mean, Icarus, I mean, that's just it's their 3rd record. I mean, they're just starting to really this is when they're kicking it into gear. This is when Kansas is Kansas. They have become Kansas. This, so many artists, at least from my perspective, they have just this 3-album run that's just unbelievable. Some of them have 5, some might have 4, but man, they just seem to hit the gas and they just go with it. And this was really kind of the beginning of a great streak of records.
Okay.
Although
yeah.
they did spell mask wrong though. I didn't know if they know that was a typo.
There was no internet to look it up back then.
This is really called the masque. Masque. It is a
The French
French term for mask. It is masque.
Okay, so there you go. All right, so for me, my number 3 is going to be the album that has, in my estimation, the best Kansas album cover. And that is none other than 1976. We're going to Left Overture. Um, Obviously, the first song, you put that needle down, boom, Carry On Wayward Son. What a change. That song did a lot for this band. Really propelled them into the band that they ended up being here with 2 back-to-back albums of 4 times platinum here. The start of the ball rolling. What's on My Mind, The Wall, Opus Insert. A lot of great stuff here on Left Overture. What can you say? This was a band that was right in their prime, right there with everything. Many of these songs they're still doing them every in concert. Over the years here, they do a lot of these from this album and the next one, obviously, the follow up. So this album definitely was the one that catapulted them here and got them to be a household name basically back in '76 there with the spirit of '76 there, the bicentennial year. Wasn't life grand back then?
Yes.
All right, so yeah, there you have it. Obviously, Left Overture was definitely probably a surprise to hear it coming out of my mouth this early, because there are 2 more albums left in my ranking here. But this one not only reached number 5 on the charts, but it definitely spawned Carry On Wayward Son obviously reached number 11. Oddly enough, What's on My Mind it was released as a single but never charted here in the US. And those look like the only 2 songs that were actually released from that album. So to get that kind of record sales out of really just one song that only reached number 11, that's actually phenomenal right there. That it got as high as it did and sold all those records basically with just one real. But it's a great song, Carry On Wayward Son. Where can you go now? You can still hear that song nowadays everywhere you go on classic rock radio or even going into the supermarket. You hear it playing over the speakers. So definitely a great song that very still well known today.
Yeah, I mean AOR, back in the AOR days, you didn't have to be a hit single to be popular. So, you don't see that much anymore, unfortunately.
No, but 4 million, that's a lot to push back then, even if even if the sales, some of them did come later on down the line. I mean, who knows? Yeah. Still, initially, that you heard that song everywhere when it first came out, if you were around.
Oh, sure.
So,
yep.
All right, so we got 2 to go. What do you got there, Davey?
Okay, my number 2 from 1977, 4 times platinum, like you said, Joey. Point of No Return at number 2.
Wow.
It's an amazing record. It's got some excellent pop and rock songs, and it has the epic prog. Closet Chronicles is great, and 2 songs that no one really talks about, Nobody's Home and Hopelessly Human, that end the record. Excellent songs. I love those tracks. It's down to Kerry Livgren with his composing and Walsh on the vocals. Those tracks are great. And even the deep tracks like The Spider, Portrait He Knew, Paradox, excellent songs. Point of No Return at number 2.
All right. Well, my number 2 is Left Overture. So took all the wind out of my sails, Joey. Thanks a lot. I got nothing to say.
Oh, come on.
I mean,
you
the
always got
wall,
something to say.
No, it's a great. I mean, it really comes out. It really is a coin toss to me as far as Left Overture and Point of No Return. I mean, you've got something else in there I can't figure out yet because I didn't keep that close of a track, Joey. But To me, yeah, this is, as I said, when you get to, there's just certain records that obviously are going to be near the top. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. We mentioned Rush, Moving Pictures, Triumph, Allied Forces. Styx, Grand Illusion, Piece of Eight. You just have these real sweet spots in the catalog, and I don't know. I love this record. I mean, there's nothing like you said. The test of time is not even necessarily airplay. It's the fact that when you have a band that's been around this long that has 15 records, if they're still pulling 2 or 3 songs from a record, it's got to be a pretty strong record. So, because a lot of people owned it, it was a soundtrack of a lot of people's lives, and just a great, just a great. I mean, to me, that's classic Kansas. That is the sound that people associate most with Kansas. And Carry On, Wayward Son. I mean, that had a whole second life as part of a guitar video game, which I think Guitar Hero, I think, was the name of it, which introduced that to a whole slew of young people. I mean, I know my kids used to play that one on the video game, and they're like, this song, it's so cool. I'm like, so cool. That thing was up before you were born, You weren't even a thought. I was so high, smoking joints, listening to this record before you were born. I mean, come on, kid. But yeah, so that's what I got to say to that.
All right. Well, my number 2 is the one that you probably couldn't figure it out, but it is none other than the 1986 album. The first one was Steve Morse, contains their 21st single, which cracked the top 20, and that is none other than Power. And the song in question was All I Wanted, which to me is definitely the best song on the album. I might be a homer on that one because, everybody says, oh, you like the hit, the single. But I just love that song. I thought that was a great song, and that's what got me into this album. That's why I went out and bought it. And then you got Power on top of that. And then, you come in with Secret Service, Taking in the View. Oh, what a great song that is. That's one of those underrated ones that you just don't hear about. Tomb 19, Can't Cry Anymore. Yeah, just some really, really solid stuff on this album. I thought Steve Morse came right in and did a great job with Walsh. They worked great together. They they wrote the album together for the most part. I think they had a little help there. Can't Cry Anymore was a cover from the producers, but other than that, yeah,
MCA.
Yeah,
MCA probably told they had to record.
And that's probably why the album. I mean, you come on, you 86, you get a top 20 hit, and it didn't even go, not even gold. And that's why Davey made the point. MCA, the Cemetery of America, definitely is the reason why it just didn't do that good. A lot of bands had this type of problem. Jafria, another great band that started off hot with 2 solid albums. MCA did them in, no promotion. They should have been a lot bigger than what they were. Man, imagine, Thom, if we were old enough to have a job in the music industry at that point in time, what we could have done with some of these bands being like promoters of music for a record company. I could just imagine things we'd have a hand in shaping the musical landscape of America. Think about that. That's what we're kind of doing now in reverse, but these rankings we're trying to let people know, hey, about all this great music that you might not know about, and to me, Power is definitely a very underrated album. I know Davey's probably going, get this guy off the air. Come on, because he ranked it.
Yeah, but Davey said, he's like, this is a sentimental favorite. There's some people that love this record, so he as a fan, he acknowledged that. Yeah, so I he was smart about that one.
Yeah, and you like Power. Power ranks higher on your list than his.
No, it's very high on mine, but I just think because it didn't sell a lot, did they consider it a Power failure?
Oh, MCA did, obviously.
Man, look how long it took me to get the dad joke in, but we got one. It's late. Better late than never.
Well, there's no.
It's late, but not too late.
It's never too late. Too late. Oh, sorry, that's Def Leppard.
Another song used a lot.
Yeah. I got another episode for you guys if you ever wanted to do one on What song would you never like to hear ever, ever, ever again because of being overplayed way too many times? That's an episode in itself.
Star Spangled Banner. Every time I go to a game, I feel like they play that one. Of course, they just switch it up.
You mentioned Def Leppard, though. Pour Some Sugar on Me. If I never heard that song
Yeah.
again, I would love life. But anyhow, well,
Yeah.
that's for another day. Just threw that out there to give you guys an idea there. So
that's a sweet song, though, Joey.
No, we got number one here, guys. Number one. And
Okay.
the sad part is we're not all going to agree on number one because of
Drum
one
roll.
individual. Go ahead, Davey.
I wonder who that is. At any rate, my number one from 1976, the quadruple platinum album, Left Overture, is a perfect album from start to finish. That's the Kansas that I love. That's my favorite album. It's been my favorite album by them for years. And I will point out something you guys didn't mention about Carry On Wayward Son. Although I never really watched the show, I know it was used in every season of the show Supernatural. So that gave it another life. Besides being in the video game, being on classic rock radio all the time, Carry On Wayward Son was in, I think, every first or final episode of Supernatural, which lasted about 12 or 13 seasons on the CW. But my particular favorite songs, because Carry On Wayward Son, I feel is very overplayed by now, Miracles Out of Nowhere and Cheyenne Anthem are my two favorite tracks from this album. Love those songs. Definitely in my top 10 Kansas tunes. And before I finish, I just want to say that the first Kansas album I ever bought was the Best Of in the mid 80s. And I remember it was the summer. I had just learned to drive and I was going to a party at a friend's house and I had gone to the record store and I had purchased on vinyl the Best of Kansas. And I didn't want to leave it in the car. I knew it would warp, even though I was a young guy. I didn't leave it in the car. I took it into my friend's house as they're setting up for this summertime party. And they said, "Hey, what do you have there? What record did you buy?" And I showed them the Best of Kansas. And they started ranking on me and insulting me. "Why are you buying that for? Who cares about Kansas? They had hits years ago. No one cares about them." I said, "I like the songs from the radio. I wanted to get more into the band." So that was the first album I ever bought in the mid 80s. And that's
we got to start doing that. What was your first album by whatever band we're ranking? And you inspired me because I actually had it out, the very first album that I purchased by Kansas. And this is the actual record itself. I've had it for years. I'll even take it out of the plastic. Any guesses?
Probably the one you're about to introduce here.
I'm going to guess Audio Visions.
This one.
Oh, the live one.
Live one.
Yeah, the live one. The live one. I just love live albums. This is such an incredible cover too. It's so cool.
Is that 2 for the show?
Yeah,
Yes.
2 for the show.
Yeah.
2 for the show. Great album. And that was the one I just, I love double live albums. And when I go to record stores, if I could find, double live albums were just a better value than single. But yeah, no, I love that record. But anyhow, my number one, we all know, is The Point of No Return. And we've reached there, the end, the point of no return. And my absolute favorite Kansas song of all is on this record. Any guesses on that one?
Dust in the Wind.
Nope.
Your absolute Kansas song of all time.
Favorite Kansas song of all time.
Portrait He Knew.
100%. Yeah, that's the one.
I love that song too.
I love Steve Walsh's vocals on that. And when he does that song live, he just crushed it. That was, to me, just quintessential Walsh, just the way he blew through those lines. I mean, the phrasing and everything. Just a badass song. So yeah. So that's my number one song. And thanks, Davey, for reminding me about very first Kansas album ever. But such
and the double CD reissue with 11 extra songs, so 10
really
extra songs is great.
What's a CD? What's a CD? What's a CD? No,
that's what I play mostly. CDs.
I know. Joey's
me
a CD
too,
person
as you can see.
well.
As you can see behind me there.
I'm a vinyl guy.
All right, we'll get to number one, and then we'll wrap it up with everybody's last thoughts and anything else we want to add in here. But for me, I'm going to go right after Thom Jennings. Yes, we agreed on the number one. Me and Thom Jennings. Mark it down here. We agreed on an album.
I'm the odd man out.
Only on this one, but you were close. You were close. So we came close. I'm sure if we had anybody else ranking with us, everybody would have probably had this album that me and Thom do, which obviously is the Point of No Return. You probably would have had it one or two. I mean, those were the two that were,
Yeah.
I'm an oddball because I like Power, but Left Overture still made number three for me. So I would say those two albums would always be in the top three of probably everybody's ranking somewhere, And for the same reasons Thom is saying, obviously Point of No Return's another one of those songs that you hear everywhere you go. I don't really hear Dust in the Wind too much as I do those Carry On and Point of No Return, but I don't get sick of them. There's certain songs you might hear frequently or way more than you want to sometimes, but I don't ever get sick of those songs. Not like I do a couple like I mentioned, Pour Some Sugar on Me. I could definitely not want to hear that one again for as long as I live. But getting back to the album, Point of No Return and Dust in the Wind definitely are the two ones that everybody knows, just because that's just those songs were the big ones that carried this album. But like Thom says, Portrait, he knew, great song. Paradox, another great one. Sparks. Sparks of the Tempest, very underrated. I just got this album, believe it or not, probably during the pandemic area here. So probably within the last 2 years. So I wasn't quite familiar with the non-hits, because obviously I never had the album. So how else would I really know the rest of these songs? But man, yeah, some real great stuff on here. And that's the genius of being able to get some of these albums that I never had before, because then you get to discover new songs that you never knew existed and how good they are. You find new music, which is, and it's good because I like some newer bands, but I don't like a lot. There's not a lot I like. If you go to my iPod, it's all going to be mostly 70s, 80s, some 90s, a few odds and ends from 2000 and up. There's not much from 2000 up on my iPod. And that just goes to show you that the music these days just isn't as good as it was back in those other days.
Or we're just getting older.
No, I mean, I give new stuff a fair shake, but it just doesn't do anything for me,
There is good new music out there. You just have to search for it.
Yeah, there's some, but like I said, it's just not as good as the good old standards of our heyday of growing up. I mean, it's just this whole different music industry is totally different now than what it used to be. I mean, you talk to all these artists when you interview them, and and I think a lot of them are just happy that they're still able to do it because it's nothing to do with album sales no more. If you do happen to get lucky and happen to sell a really big album from this point on in your career, if you've been doing it for over 30 years, that's just a bonus. But like Thom said, they mostly do all their money off touring and merchandise and shirt sales and and it's a shame, and all these idiotic record companies are now trying to phase out CDs. I mean, it makes no sense. Streaming to me isn't that great because like when you get a album nowadays sent over for somebody to review, it's great on a publicist. They send a little click link and off they go. They don't have to worry about sending you a physical copy, waste postage, do this, do that. But it's hard to listen to it on an iPhone or a computer because you don't get the full sound as you would if you had the physical copy playing on your stereo. So I feel a lot of these album rankings really nowadays are a real joke because some of these guys barely listen to the album the first time and then they're reviewing it. And the one thing I know of like Thom, he always gives everything a real thorough listen a few times before he starts writing about an album review. He's right on top of it, and that's how I am too. I have to give everything at least a 5 times listening to really be able to give it a fair ranking. And I think a lot of these album reviews, they'll either slag the people right off the bat if it's somebody who's no longer successful, or they'll make it sound like the greatest album ever when they only played it once, and that's why you go back and you read some of these reviews a couple of years later and it just doesn't jive. But Thom, I tell you, you wrote a lot of reviews for my site, and I go back and look at a couple of them sometimes when I notice these artists, and you're pretty much right on the head still. I mean, you do a great job with these reviews when you do them.
Oh,
So
please don't stop.
Got to give you some kudos there, because
I
you're
appreciate that.
Yeah, no, well that's why I'm not going to accept a review from somebody that's favoring somebody, or doing something that's trying to give more credit than where credit's due. I like a fair, full review of something, and then
well, there's a little secret I have. I don't do as many album reviews anymore. I did get sent the new Winger box set in vinyl, which is pretty cool. I still got to open that and review it, but if I don't like something, I just don't review it because I feel like I got nothing to offer, and at the end of the day, it's like, so, Davey, for example, like if you listen to him compared to you and I mean, he's clearly the bigger fan of Kansas. I mean, he spoke from a more, like if I'm talking about Todd Rundgren, obviously I come from an area where I'm intimate with the catalog. So you're more intimate. But yeah, I mean, if I'm listening to something and I feel like it has some value, I'll share that. And I'll also share with, what my impressions are in terms of like, if you like this album, you're probably going to like this album. Because that's what it ultimately comes down to, is you got to find the veins. If you like Styx, well, maybe you'll like Triumph. If you like Triumph, maybe you'll like Rush. If you like Rush, maybe you'll like Marillion. And there's just ways to go about it. But I don't know. Again, what I love about these album rankings is that it gives me an opportunity to hear other perspectives. It either validates my opinions on a record, or maybe it makes me rethink my opinion on some records as well. And because I'll definitely go back and listen to some of those again to see if I had a better ranking or not.
Oh yeah, definitely. I go back and watch some of these videos later on too, because I go, where did I place this album? And I went and looked at it, and I go, wow, I thought I would have gave it a better review at the time.
But again, in all seriousness, I mean, there's no right answer to any of these. Very subjective. It's just meant to start the debate. The good thing is we can agree about album rankings and not have to go to war. Thankfully. And if you want to go to war with us over album rankings, please seek mental help right away.
Another thing, if I might interject, about reviewing albums is when we were younger and didn't have jobs, children, responsibility, we would just sit and listen to them, look at the album artwork. And now everyone's so busy.
Yep.
It's less time to listen to something, to study it, to let it seep into your pores, to get a feeling about it.
Have a relationship with it. Yeah, I agree. I think that there are certain records that I have a relationship with for whatever reason. This was a record that I listened to on my first date. This is a record by the band that I first saw live. This is a record that, I met the guy that produced it. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Or, my best friend who passed away gave me a copy of this. I mean, it's all good stuff. But yeah, it's hard because, again, that is always a component of your relationship with the record. It goes beyond whether the record itself is good. It still has to be good for you to even bother to listen to it. But there's always those added pieces where it's like, if it brings you back to a really good time, man, that's a win,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's basically the eggs in a basket here for Kansas. I did want to.
Hey, we got to thank Davey, right? Because man, what a great job today, man! Let's have a nice round of applause.
Thank you for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
You were a fantastic third person today.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. Is it okay if I talk about some of the other stuff I've done? Is that cool?
Sure, go ahead.
That's up to Joey. He's the commander of the ship.
Just to add on about the best of, there's a great song on there. It's not even on there anymore. If you buy the CD, they took it off there. Perfect Lover.
Oh.
John Belafonte song, which is a great Kansas song. It's a hard rocking song, Perfect Lover. And I'm glad Thom mentioned the live album, because that's a great live album Two for the Show. Excellent live album. And I started seeing Kansas live. I think it was the early 90s. I saw them in 92 when they were between records, between In the Spirit of Things and before Freaks of Nature. I saw them at a small place on Long Island called Sparks. I think it was Sparks or Spit, one of those two rock clubs. I saw Kansas for the first time. And I remember Steve Walsh making a joke about, what day is it? Oh, The Simpsons is on tonight. It's Sunday. That's how I know what day of the week it is, by what TV shows are on. So I think I saw them on a Sunday night because he brought up The Simpsons. And he was still at the time doing the acrobatic moves where he would do a handstand on his keyboards. He was in such good physical shape at the time. He used to do that from the 70s, I think, till about the early 90s.
Wow.
Where he'd brace himself and do a handstand on the keyboards. Great.
What's he think he is, Lawrence Gowan or something? Come on, man.
The spinning keyboard is Larry Gowan there from Canada. At any rate.
Well, that's interesting. Real quick to follow up on what you just mentioned, that Perfect Lover song. I actually have it on my Best of Kansas CD, but I got the original version of it. It's interesting. I didn't realize that's a song that's not even on any of the regular Kansas albums. That's it was a new song that was recorded, I guess, around the time of this Greatest Hits album. Is that correct?
Yes, it was recorded after, what is it? Drastic Measures.
Yeah.
The band sort of was starting to break up, and I think it's just on that song, it's Elefante, E. Hart, Dave Hope, and I think Rich Williams. It's just like four of them.
Yeah, Kerry wasn't on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It says he's on all of them except Perfect Lover. Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's see, another thing I didn't even realize. That's another great great thing there. And Dino Elefante played bass on Perfect Lover.
That's it. Okay, so Dave Hope's not on it then.
Yep, Dave Hope's not on it either. Yeah.
He was gone. He and Kerry, they got heavily into religion, and they both started, I think, preaching, and they started their own churches.
Yep.
So that's what happened. That's sort of what broke up the lineup, is that Walsh and also Steinhardt weren't thrilled with the lyrical direction that Kerry was going in. That Livgren was writing a lot of very spiritual songs and songs about God, and they diverged on the lyrics. That was a big bone of contention in the band, sticking point between the members. As odd as it seems, but that's what was happening 40 years ago.
All right, yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Joe.
No, you're good. Go right ahead. I'm done.
Okay, just really fast. I've appeared on a couple of videos. Jack Toledano has a channel. He's friends with Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility, which is a big YouTube channel. And I've been on Jack's channel, Jack Toledano. He has a channel, All or Nada, According to Jack. So I've been on a few videos there. And I just taped a video with a guy from Australia named Bicycle Legs. And he's on a lot of videos on the Contrarians channel, which I think is a really good YouTube channel. So we just did a Billy Joel video that's going to air very soon.
Nice.
Another one of my favorites, Billy Joel. And next year sometime, I don't know when, but I'm going to be starting my own YouTube channel, which my girlfriend and my sister have been on me for years to do. And now I finally decided to do it. And it's probably going to be called Cretin Classics or Cretin's Classics, but I'm not 100% on the name yet. But I will be starting a channel sometime in 2024.
What are you going to feature on it, basically?
A lot of album rankings and a lot of talking about when I worked in the record store and a lot of the live shows I've been to, because I used to go to a lot of concerts, more than I do now. I still go occasionally. But in the 80s and 90s, I went to like hundreds of shows.
Cool. Well, hey, I volunteered a guest. I'm sure Joey will as well.
Oh, thanks.
If you
guys.
need anybody, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be covering bands that don't even have album rankings on YouTube. Just some unusual bands in the prog world and in the classic rock world, some new wave stuff, bands I like from the early 80s, and no one's done any album rankings on them. So I'm going to focus on stuff that not a lot of people have focused on. And I'll do, the big bands too that I love: Zeppelin, Queen, Styx, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. Probably my favorite bands of all time is Yes.
All right. Well, looking forward to seeing that down the road there. So that's something to look forward to. And obviously on this channel, we're going to keep on rolling with things, and we're gonna try to branch off. Like we got the new here. Make sure you check that out here. We'll put that in the link here for you guys to check out our first episode. And then we always got some interesting things coming up. We're gonna do on a regular basis now that the summer concert season's kind of tailed off, and we're gonna hit the dreary doldrums of winter here in Western New York, right,
Oh,
Mr. Jennings?
Oh
Sir
yeah.
Jennings.
Yeah, now that the bill season is in the tank.
Over, yeah.